Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another Magic Arena gameplay video. Today we're taking a look at a Pauper deck that you can use to enter into the Pauper event that's currently ongoing, so that means we only get to use commons to build our deck, and I've been having a lot of fun and success with a 4-color Hexproof deck. And there's not a ton of different hexproof creatures you can play at common, but we do get access to 4 copies of a Jungleborn Pioneer, 3 mana for a 2/2 Merfolk. When it enters the battlefield, we get to make a 1/1 Merfolk creature token with hexproof, so we don't really care about the 2/2, but we do care about the token with hexproof. And then we also get access to 4 copies of Jade Guardian, 4 mana for a 2/2 Merfolk with hexproof, and when the Guardian enters the battlefield, we can put a +1/+1 counter on target Merfolk we control, which of course also includes the Jade Guardian itself. But if we already have a Merfolk token from the Pioneer with a bunch of enchantments on it, we can always put an extra +1/+1 counter on it instead of putting it on the Jade Guardian. So those are all the hexproof creatures we have in the main deck. There are some additional hexproof creatures we could be playing, and I have experimented with a few of them. For example, at 5 mana in blue, you get access to Soul of the Rapids, which is nice because it has built-in flying, so you don't have to spend a flying enchantment on it. But at 5 mana it is pretty slow, so if you're up against an aggressive deck, having to spend 5 mana to play your 3/2, which doesn't really impact the board all that much, means that before you get to put enchantments on the Soul of the Rapids to make it more of a threat, you might be just too far behind. So it's much better to have cheap hexproof creatures so that you can play enchantments on them as soon as possible. So the earliest we can do that is turn 3 with the 1/1 token we get from Jungleborn Pioneer, but turn 4 is still pretty reasonable. But as soon as we start talking turn 5 and turn 6, it might just be too slow. So that's why we're not playing Soul of the Rapids or Coldwater Snapper, but you could try them out if you want to. And then the rest of the deck is very straightforward. We're just playing a whole bunch of auras to improve our creatures and to add all sorts of abilities. So let's go over the entire list here. At 1 mana we've got 2 copies of Arcane Flight, a 1-mana aura giving +1/+1 and flying. We've got the full 4 copies of One with the Wind for 2 mana giving +2/+2 and flying. Then we also have 4 copies of Urban Utopia to fix our mana, so when it enters the battlefield, it enchants one of our lands, and the land can tap to add 1 mana of any color, and then also draws a card when it enters the battlefield, so replaces itself. And our deck doesn't have a ton of early plays, so spending our turn 2 to cast Urban Utopia is totally acceptable. Then we've got 4 copies of Squire's Devotion, which is a 3 mana aura, giving +1/+1 and lifelink. And lifelink is very important since you will face a lot of aggressive decks in this Pauper format, so being able to give our hexproof creature lifelink, as well as adding additional power and toughness, is very key, and that's also why we're playing 4 colors, since the black enchantment, the only black card in this deck, is Mark of the Vampire, which is the other lifelink enchantment we have in the deck, 4 mana giving +2/+2 and lifelink. So we get access to 4 Mark of the Vampire and 4 Squire's Devotion, so that way we will consistently have access to a lifelink enchantment to make sure we can outrace opposing aggro decks. And when Squire's Devotion enters the battlefield, we also get to make a 1/1 vampire creature token with a lifelink that can maybe help us chum block. And it is important to note that you can always enchant the opponent's creature with Squire's Devotion. Their creature will get +1/+1 and lifelink, but you will still get the 1/1 vampire creature token that can maybe help you block to survive an additional turn. So that's also something to keep in mind. And then of course we've got the 4 Jungleborn Pioneers. We've got the full 4 copies of Oakenform, 3 mana enchantment giving +3/+3. We've got 4 copies of Candlelight Vigil, giving +3/+2 and Vigilance also pretty important when you're trying to race an opposing aggro deck, so you can play offense and defense. We've got our 4 Mark of the Vampire. We've got our 4 Jade Guardians, and finally 2 Woodshapers for mana 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, we can look at the top 4 cards of our library, and then we can reveal a creature or enchantment card from among those to put into our hand. So not only helps us find one of our hexproof creatures, but later in the game, if we already have a hexproof creature, can help us find more enchantments to improve our hexproof creature. And then the mana base is definitely one of the more complicated parts of the deck. I did try different variations with more guild gates, but eventually I settled on playing 4 copies of Gateway Plaza, which has proven to be pretty useful. So it's a land that enters the battlefield tapped, and we also have to pay 1 mana when it enters the battlefield, otherwise we have to sacrifice it, but then it does make 1 mana of any color, so will help us cast all our different enchantments. And again, since we're not doing much on turn 2 anyways, we might as well fix our mana with a Gateway Plaza. And then we've got the full 4 copies of Evolving Wilds, which can fetch up any of our basic lands, And we've got 6 basic forests, 2 basic swamps, 3 basic islands, and 5 basic plains. And then of course we also get the mana fixing from our Urban Utopia to make sure we can cast our spells. So at first I had more gates in the deck, but that proved to be a little bit too clunky, since often you would be a turn behind, since you would have a tapped land instead of an untapped basic land. And being a turn behind in this deck can be pretty detrimental, since you're already pretty slow out of the gates, not really affecting the board on turn 1 or 2. So it's important to have that smooth mana base with a lot of untapped lands. So yeah, that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, so I'm already in a Holiday Pauper event, currently 3-0. Let's see if we can improve that. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand looks decent enough. Do need a 4th land for the Jade Guardian, but having a hexproof creature and a bunch of enchantments is always important. And here we have to decide what to fetch with our Evolving Wilds. We could also wait, since we probably wouldn't be casting anything on turn 2 anyways. And if we draw into a swamp, for example, we can fetch a plains, or the other way around. But we could draw into Urban Utopia or into our Gateway Plaza and want the untapped land here. And given that we have 2 Mark of the Vampires, I think we'll get the swamp. Alright, another Jade Guardian. So hopefully we'll draw 4th land in time. And then the second Jade Guardian can function as an additional +1/+1 counter. Oof, triple Jade Guardian. Alright, we better draw land next turn. But our opponent's not pressuring us too much, so we might be able to survive even if we miss a land drop. Opponent with a Wayfinder, 2/2 that explores, finds a basic swamp. Alright, did find a land, luckily. So with the cards we currently have in hand, we can give our Guardian +4/+4 and lifelink, and then 2 additional +1/+1 counters. So we can make it pretty big. There's a Llanowar Elves, that's one of the prizes from the event. And yeah, it's common, there's not many ways to deal with hexproof creatures, since you don't get to play cards like Eldest Reborn or Playcrafter to make us sacrifice creatures, and there's no sweeper effects we need to worry about. Alright, there's a Gateway Plaza. So sadly we don't get to play the Plaza and one of our 4 mana cards, so I think we'll just be playing the Mark of the Vampire for now. Make a 5/5 Jade Guardian and attack. And a 5/5 should be pretty safe from most shenanigans. Alright, they're just jumping with the Llanowar Elves, so we'll pass a turn. Can't play our Plaza, otherwise we would have to sacrifice it since we can't pay the 1 mana. So this is a situation where it's kind of a drawback over a Guildgate. But of course it will make white mana for Squire's Devotion, which would not be a guarantee if this were a Guildgate. Alright, Candlelight Vigil's nice. So we could take a turn off so we can get the Plaza down, so on the following turns we can maybe play Candlelight Vigil on the Guardian. But I think we're okay to just play another Mark of the Vampire for now. Make a 7/7 Jade Guardian. Could have also decided to play another Jade Guardian instead, so we can put a +1/+1 counter on it and have a 2/2 blocker in play, but I think we're doing okay for now. If we ever find one of our flying enchantments, we can just fly over so the opponent can't unblock anymore. Since the way we could be in a bit of trouble is if our opponent has a Death Touch creature on the ground to block our hexproof creature, so that's where the flying enchantments come in handy. But no Death Touch creatures to be seen, at least not yet. Alright, Jungleborn Pioneers. I think this turn we might just go Plaza plus Pioneer. If our opponent has a green pump spell like Titanic Growth, they could potentially kill our Jade Guardian, so that's something we have to keep in mind. But this doesn't strike me like the type of deck that would have multiple Titanic Growths, so I think we will still attack, even though there's a small risk. Uh-oh, opponent's blocking, that's not good. Alright, it's just a chum block. That worked out. Play Jade Guardian. And of course they can kill the Pioneer itself, but we still get to keep our Hexproof token, most likely. Unless our opponent has a -1/-1 effect, like the Vapors, which is a card you do see every now and then as a measure against a Red Colony deck. And the Red Colony deck is definitely One of the bad matchups for our deck, since the Red Colony deck is quick to get on the board. So if we don't get an early Jungleborn Pioneer and a few lifelink enchantments out, the Red Colony deck can usually kill us before we get going. But against any other kind of mid-rangey deck or deck that has a lot of spot removal spells, the Hexproof strategy is pretty effective. So now our opponent has a total of 8 power on defense, so Jade Guardian would not be able to attack, but of course we have a Candlelight Vigil, which is going to help here. So we are safe to attack if our opponent doesn't have interaction, so let's get in there. Opponent's just going to chum block. And we're just a flying enchantment away from closing out the game, but as long as our opponent's just chum blocking every turn, they're not really making any progress. Alright, the second Rhizome Lurcher will help them stabilize, but they are still pretty far away from attacking us on the way back since we've got a 10-9 blocker with lifelink. So now we can kind of take our time and eventually find one of our flying enchantments, so we're not really in a hurry. So we've got 7 mana, so we could give this +2/+2, give it up to 11 toughness, which is still not enough to attack here. But we're still gonna go for it. And I think we still keep putting all our eggs into the same basket here for when we do find our flying enchantment. One thing we do have to keep in mind is if our opponent, for example, finds a sacrifice outlet, like a Thallid Omnivore, we could be in a bit of trouble if they manage to, for example, chum block our big life-linking creature and then sacrifice the creature they chum block with, because then we wouldn't gain the life from the lifelink. But given that we're at 45, I don't think we're going to be in any danger. So let's just keep playing more stuff. Got 6 flying enchantments in our deck and 2 wood shapers that could maybe help us find it. But otherwise we're just gonna say draw go for a while. And there we go. 1 with the wind. 15 power flyer. And that should be the game. And our opponent packs it in. Awesome. Alright, let's see if we can win the last one here for the clean sweep. Alright, our hand looks pretty decent. We've got our Jade Guardian, Utopia to draw cards, so we're likely to find our 4th land, and then a lifelink enchantment plus a way to make our Jade Guardian even bigger. Solid hand. We are on the draw, so a very aggressive deck could maybe outrace us before we manage to land our lifelink enchantment. But I think we have a decent shot at beating a pretty fast draw. Alright, double planes. So let's play Utopia. Doesn't matter too much what we enchant. Alright, still no 4th land, so hopefully we'll find one soon. And a Pegasus Courser. These mono-white aggressive decks with a bunch of flying creatures, and sometimes they'll also play enchantments, is pretty popular and overall a pretty good matchup for our deck, which is part of the reason why I built it. Alright, there's a land, perfect. So next turn we'll get to play Jade Guardian, and then we'll start putting some pants on it. Opponent with a pretty slow start, maybe holding a bunch of removal spells which don't do anything against our hexproof creature. Could also be holding some pump spells. The implications of pump spells are definitely important to keep in mind in this deck. Alright, so we could go Mark of the Vampire plus Arcane Flight, which would give +3 total. So even a +2 pump spell here would not be enough to kill the Jade Guardian. So I think we go for it. Opponent takes it. And next turn we're probably just gonna put an Oaken Form on the Jade Guardian. Another Pegasus Courser. And our opponent's attacking. Alright. So now we can go Oaken Form plus Squire's Devotion. And our opponent packs it in, yeah. I mean, that's kind of what our deck is trying to do, and when it works works pretty well. Every now and then you'll have opening hands where you don't have any hexproof creature and you have to mulligan, or you draw too many creatures and not enough enchantments. But overall, the deck's been working pretty well for me, and I got my 4 copies of Firemind's Research pretty quickly. So let's claim our prize, yet another Firemind's Research. Sweet. So that'll do it for today's video. Wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day. I also wanna thank all my patrons for being part of the channel, and you can become a patron yourself today and decide the topic of future videos over at patreon.com/LegenVD.